Hi everyone, it's Erin from the Provincial Farmhouse. In today's video, I'm doing some farmhouse thrift flips. For my first project, I'm going to be working on this wall decor piece. I already loved the shape of it. It reminded me of a serving board or a chopping board, and I really just wanted to change the center design. So I'm going to be using Paint Couture's Autumn Sage chalk paint in the center. Now, as I started to apply it, I noticed it was looking quite thin, and then I remembered that I had not stirred my paint. So always remember to stir your chalk paints really well, get all those pigments mixed up really well so that you get better coverage. As you can see here, it's covering a lot better now. So I am going to be adding 2 coats of this in the center, and if I get any on the outside border, I can just go in with a wet wipe and wipe it off before it's completely dry. Now, if you're not confident doing something like this, you could always use some masking tape to tape off the outside area, because as I said, I actually really like the wood and the wood tone as it is, so I'm not going to be doing anything to that outside section. Once I finished wiping off the excess from the outside border and the paint was dry, I took out this transfer design by Redesign. This one is called Golden Fields Farm, and I quite liked the text underneath, so I am actually going to trim it out so that it fits a bit better down the bottom. I only want to have 2 lines, so just keep this in mind with your transfers. You can cut them up and rearrange them to suit your project. Now, I absolutely love the cow with the florals. I think she's absolutely adorable, so I'm not going to be changing her. And in this particular transfer, you actually get 3 different cow designs and some text. Before that though, I'm going to be using IOD's Barnwood Planks stamp, and I'm going to be using the white permanent ink by IOD as well. I'm going to ink it up, and then I'm going to be laying that over the background to create some interest and again add to that country farmhouse feel. So I'm going to lay it down, but I'm not going to be pressing super hard. I don't want it to be really heavy. This is a background I'm creating. It is not going to be the main focus of the piece, so I'm just pressing lightly, and I'm going to continue to do this across the rest of the board, inking it up in some areas if it becomes too light. Once I finished adding that design, I grabbed another one of the stamps from the same pack, and I'm actually mainly focusing my ink on the outside section of this stamp because it has the lines that you would find in between planks. So I'm just going to ink up that area, and then I'm going to lay that down the center. And again, I don't want the lines to be too heavy, so I'm not pressing too hard, and I'm not going to re-ink up my stamp for the next section just underneath. I'm just going to lay that straight down. In the Barnwood plank stamps, you also get these little end pieces that have marks representing nails. So I'm going to ink up one of those, and I'm going to just add that in a few random areas to show it's the end of the planks. So again, this is just a background. I don't need it to be perfect. On the edges, I did sort of bend the stamp so that it didn't go up onto the outside border. Before my ink has time to dry and set, I'm using a wet wipe to wipe back some of the intensity of that white ink. I don't want it to be super obvious. I want it to be a faded, more muted background. When my surface was completely dry, I took out that lovely cow transfer design, and I'm going to position that in the center up the top. I'm going to press it down and then run my transfer tool over the entire piece first to get everything stuck down properly. And I like to do this just to make sure that my design will stay in place. And then I like to pick a corner and I start lifting up the plastic as I'm rubbing, and I just keep doing that until I have the entire design down. I then like to take the sheet and rub it over the design to further burnish it in place. Next, I'm going to start laying out the text transfers, and then I'm going to peel the backing off and start transferring those down one word at a time. I didn't put any lines or anything in. I know that the end result isn't going to be perfectly straight, but I don't mind. A lot of farmhouse and country decor items are not perfect. They give that imperfect look, and honestly, I just feel like it adds to the charm of a piece personally. But if you are a little bit worried about this, you could definitely add in some lead pencil lines. If you're going to try this and you don't have the text transfer, you could also use stamps or stencils for this part. Finally, I'm going to seal the entire centerpiece with some of Paint Couture's Extreme Guard in satin. You definitely want to make sure that you are sealing up your transfers. And if you do not have a clear coat, another option would be to use a wax or perhaps a sealer in a spray can. And here's a look at our finished project. This was a quick and easy project, but it was definitely a lot of fun to do something in the farmhouse style. Let me know what you think of this in the comments. For my second project, I'm going to be working on this utensil holder. After cleaning, I'm going to be priming it with Paint Couture's 2-in-1 primer in grey. I am using grey because that's what I have open, but you can also use a white primer. I am first laying down the product, but then you can see I'm coming in and I'm doing a dabbing and stippling motion. I like to do this to make sure that I don't have obvious brush strokes. So I'm going to be applying one coat, letting it dry for about an hour, and then I'm going to come in and do a second coat. I also went in and added the primer to the inside of the project as well. This isn't food safe, but it's just for the utensil handle, so I don't really see this as being an issue. Next, I'm going to be using this little resin piece that was gifted to me. A friend of mine has the Redesign mold. I believe it's called Sunny Morning Rooster and Chickens, perhaps. I believe it's retired, so I don't have that one, but she very kindly made me up a few resin pieces from that mold. I'm heating it up with my hairdryer so that it becomes pliable first. And then once I have it molded to the shape, I'm adding some Gorilla Super Glue gel to the back. I'm then going to position it where I want it on my canister there, and I'm going to hold it in place for about a minute. I'm then going to be using Paint Couture's Pine Cone Chalk Paint. I'm going to pour some of that out into a plastic container, and then I'm going to be using my Saltwash mixture. I'm going to be scooping out some of that into the Pine Cone Chalk Paint, and I'm going to stir it really well. I want to create a thicker mixture reminiscent of, say, peanut butter. So if you are trying to achieve this, just keep adding the salt wash until you're happy with it. If your mixture gets a bit too thick, you can also add a bit more of your paint. Once I'm happy with the consistency, I'm going to start dabbing that on with a chip brush. You really don't want to use your good brushes with the salt wash mixture. It can be very hard on the bristles. So I'm just going to continue adding my salt wash mixture to my entire piece. I'm really going in quite heavy around my chicken there because I have a little bit of a gap. I really struggled to get that completely flat because these were not fresh castings, but that salt wash is definitely able to smooth that transition between the resin piece and the rest of the project. I did use a wet wipe to pull back some of that salt wash from the chicken because I don't want the beautiful details on that resin mold to be hidden. I want those to be visible. I'm also adding the texture to the inside of the project as well. Before the salt wash mixture is completely dry, I'm going back in with my chip brush and I'm brushing down the peaks. I'm definitely being gentle here. I don't want to pull that paint back, but I do want to soften the texture that we've created. So you can do this with salt wash. You can gently brush down the peaks that you created. When that was dry, I took out Paint Couture's Farmhouse Linen Chalk Paint and I'm going to add just a little bit more of that salt wash, but I'm adding it to the Farmhouse Linen to thicken up the paint, and also it helps it to go a little bit further. So I'm going to have enough to be able to finish up my project. So I'm then going to go in and I'm going to start brushing on that Farmhouse Linen. I'm happy for it to miss certain spots. That's why we went in and added the brown paint so that it would be okay to show through any of the gaps in that white paint. So I'm just going to continue to add the Farmhouse Linen mixture to my entire piece, and I ended up doing 2 coats, but my second coat was a lot lighter. I was just going in and catching any areas that was still showing maybe some of that grey primer, and just making sure that I was getting any areas that maybe had some drips. So this is to your own personal taste if you're going to try this look out. When my paint was dry, I took out this stencil that I bought off Amazon. I believe it's a folk art stencil. I bought it a while ago, so I'll see if I can still find the link. I'm then going to be using Paint Couture's pitch black chalk paint with my JRV 1-inch stencil brush. I'm just doing a swirling motion over the top of this lovely chicken wire stencil, and I had forgotten that I'd not long ago actually washed my stencil brush, so I did end up getting quite a bit of bleed through because it had essentially watered down my paint, but that's okay. I'm just coming in with a wet wipe now and pulling back some of that. I was definitely going to go for a faded, more broken look with this anyway, but thankfully, because I was able to go in quickly with the wet wipe, you can't see a lot of the really heavy bleed through. So definitely a lesson learnt for me. I need to make sure that I dry my brushes off a bit better after I've washed them. So I'm just going to continue to work my way around the utensil canister there and randomly add that chicken wire. And again, I'm certainly happy for it to have a bit of a broken look to it. We're going for a farmhouse weathered and worn look, so I feel like this definitely fits. I was really excited to finally use this stencil, and I felt like it definitely added a little bit more interest, a little bit more depth to my project. But obviously, if this felt a little bit over the top to you, this is definitely a step that you could leave out. When my paint was dry, I took out Paint Couture's Amber Honey Antiquing Glaze, and I'm going to be working it into the utensils label first. Now this has the text embedded in it, so this is really going to bring out those letters, make it more obvious, and I really like how it's sitting in the details around it as well. I then moved on to our chicken resin piece, and I'm applying that and then again coming in with a wet wipe and pulling it back. And it's at this stage that all of that texture that we created and the ridges that maybe weren't obvious when it was its original color are really being highlighted. I'm just really loving how this glaze is sitting down in all of the details. Now I haven't sealed my paint yet, so I am working in sections. If you are worried about it soaking in a bit too much and getting too dark, obviously pop down a clear coat first before you do this step. But I was going for a rustic look anyway, so it doesn't matter if it is uneven in appearance. I am just embracing that rustic look and really loving it. This is a really beautiful color. It definitely has a bit more of a red or orangey tinge to it, which again I think fits in perfectly with Farmhouse. Once I finished adding the glaze to the outside, I of course then added it to the inside as well. When the glaze was completely dry, I then took out my Extreme Guard in satin top coat, and I'm going to give this piece 2 coats because it's going in a kitchen. I definitely want to know that it's all sealed up and protected so that if there's any spills, whoever has this in their home is able to wipe that back. And here's a look at our finished utensil holder. I really love how this turned out. It definitely feels sort of primitive farmhouse, and I think that that casting looks great with the stencil. Let me know what you think of this in the comments. For my final project, I'm going to be working on this tray. Now, yes, it already has Farmhouse Kitchen in the center, but it's a bit too generic. So I'm going to come in with Paint Couture's Simply White chalk paint, and I'm going to be adding 3 coats to get the coverage that I want, but only in the center section. I still want to have a wooden frame on the outside. I do love the two-toned look, so I think this will be quite an easy flip, but definitely very effective. Now, if you are going to try this and again you're a bit nervous about not getting paint in areas you don't want it, I definitely recommend adding that masking tape or having a wet wipe at the ready to wipe that back. In between coats, I did use my hairdryer to speed up the drying process because I found that occasionally I would get some really fun cracks and texture, and as we're going for a farmhouse look, this definitely fits that look. Next, I'm going to be using IOD's Mercantile stamp. I really love the layout of the design already, so I am just going to be taking my stamps off and positioning them. This Laurel design here was a little bit bigger than my tray, so I did have to manipulate it a little bit, have it a little bit more curved, but everything else, as you can see, I'm just positioning very similarly to how they appear on the stamp already, but just arranging it to fit my tray. Once I'm happy with that, I'm going to take out just a bit of plastic and I'm going to press that over the top of my stamps. I am doing this so that I can maintain that layout so that I know it's going to fit perfectly on my tray. I'm then going to be using my IOD permanent black ink over the top of the entire design, and if I get ink anywhere that I don't want it, I'm just going to use a wet wipe to pull that back. I'm then going to flip that over, position it in the center and press down. I'm then going to move my fingers around, applying pressure, also making sure that I always have one hand holding the stamp in place so that I don't have any shifting. And you can always have a little peek, lift the stamp up slightly to make sure that you've got the contact that you want, and then I'm going to pull it off. You would have seen there I had one hand holding it in the left in place and I've pulled it up from the side. That was just to make sure that everything stayed in place and didn't fall off. I'm then going to be using some elements from the Vintage Textures stamp. I'm inking up one of the designs that's meant to look like chippy paint, and then I'm just going to randomly press it into the background sections of my design. So again, no right or wrong way to do this. I'm just randomly pressing it. You'll see I'm just pressing bits and pieces of it down. I'm not putting the whole stamp down on my surface. I'm changing the angle and the orientation of the stamp and just really having a bit of a play with how that's going to look. I do really love these stamps. They definitely do look authentically worn and vintage. Once I was finished using that one, I took out this design here, and I think it's meant to be cracked paint, and this one is definitely a lot of fun. Again, just randomly pressing it down, not using the whole stamp. I'm really going for a weathered and worn paint look for this one, so I just had a bit of fun with this stamp. I then took out a wet wipe and I'm going to start wiping back some of that ink. It was a little bit darker than I wanted. I'm not going to wipe back the center stamp design that we've just done, just the distressing marks. And really, I think IOD ink is probably the only one that you can do this with without getting smudging. When my surface was dry, I took out Paint Couture's Van Dyke Brown Glaze, and I'm going to begin by adding it to the center and some of the inner corners and edges. I really want to have it sort of accumulating in those spots, and then I'm going to use a wet wipe to pull some of it back. Now originally I was going to just only have it in the center, but I really liked how it was looking on the wooden sides and how it was toning that wood and giving it sort of a richer brown look to it. I felt like it would tie in better with the center section and the brown tone that we're creating there. So I do end up adding it to the outside. It felt like the wood wasn't completely sealed. This is just sort of a generic tray that I think I picked up at one of our dollar stores here in Australia. So I was able to use that glaze to tone the stain there, because Paint Couture's glazes can be used as a semi-gel stain as well. So now I'm just coming in and I'm pulling back some of that with a wet wipe, and you can see I'm dabbing more than I'm wiping in the center part. I find this gives a bit more of an authentically worn look rather than wiping it back. However, on the outside parts, on the wooden parts, I do wipe it back just to make sure I've got that even coverage over the top of the wood. I was definitely going for a more rustic, primitive look with this project, but if this isn't to your style, obviously you could leave the glaze out, or maybe you could even come in with a whitewash or a white wax to tone it down. You could add in some color in the center stamp design. I, again, just wanted to keep it really simple and rustic looking. If I inspire you to try any of the Paint Couture products used in today's video, I would really appreciate it if you would use my affiliate link. I will put it in the description and on the screen. I just get a little thank you from Paint Couture in return. When the glaze was dry, I took out my IOD black ink pad again, and I'm just going to be running it along the edges of the tray, outside, inside, and on the corner edges. I really liked the hint of black that this brought, and it sort of tied the handles and the center design in with the rest of the tray. When the ink was dry, I then took out my Extreme Guard in Satin by Paint Couture, and I'm going to be sealing the entire tray, the inside design and also the outside part of the tray, because we've used that glaze to deepen the stain. And I'm just going to seal it all up so that if someone wants to actually put cups and plates and things on the tray, they'll be able to wipe up any spills. And here's a look at our finished tray. I'm really pleased with how this turned out. It definitely has a primitive farmhouse feel. Let me know what you think of this in the comments. I really hope that you've enjoyed today's video and that it's given you some ideas on how you can use transfers, stamps and molds to give your home decor a farmhouse makeover. Let me know if you had a favorite project from today. If you enjoyed today's video, I would really appreciate it if you would hit that like button, comment and share it out. If you haven't already, I would love it if you would hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so that you don't miss out on any of our videos. You can find the products used today on our website, theprovincialfarmhouse.com.au. Thanks for watching.